Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we're going to talk about who has the best battleship armor of World War II and why. First off, a refresher. Battleship armor comes in three different main types. I'll use the US Navy parlance here because we've used that in the past. Some of you might already be familiar with it. But there is Class A armor, like the side of the gun turret here. This is face-hardened armor. This is thick armored plate that, after being made, has then also been heated up so that a certain amount of the forward face becomes even harder. There's also Class B armor, like the face plate of the turret there, and that is homogeneous armor. So Class A armor is just Class B armor that has then been heated up to have a harder face on it to protect against projectiles. The two different types of armor are more effective depending on the angle that they're being hit at. So for low obliquity shots where a shell is hitting the armor more or less straight on, you want something hard that is going to resist it at the initial point of impact. It can't be so hard that then the entire plate is brittle, and if a shell is able to punch through, it then turns that plate into what's called spalls, or shrapnel that's blowing out the back and making even more damage. There's also the higher obliquity shots where a shell is hitting at an extreme angle, which may skip off of the armor. For that, you want something relatively soft and ductile that will absorb that impact and maybe even bend, but not shatter. And if a shell does punch through it, it basically rips a gash in the side of it that then lets the projectile through without causing a tremendous amount of spalling. Finally, in the US Navy, there's Sts Plating, which is basically just homogeneous Class B armor, but thinner, so that it can be rolled out instead of cast in specific large thicknesses. An example of that would be the main deck of the battleship, which is made out of 1.5-inch thick STS with 2 inches of teak on top of it. This is good as splinter protection. It is good as a decapping layer, so if an armor-piercing shell hits it, it's not thick enough to try and resist the shell, but it is thick enough to knock off the armor-piercing cap and then make it less effective punching through the armor below it. It'll also set off the fuse, which may cause the shell to detonate before it's able to punch through subsequent levels of armor. We'd like to give a special shout out to Kamikoto Knives. They make high-quality Japanese steel cooking knives. So today we are in the ship's butcher shop, which historically would be a place where knives like these, although of considerably lower quality American steel, would have been used. And we're going to open this up and check it out for the first time. So first off, it comes in a fine ashwood box. Going to talk about the battleship Yamato later in this video. Her decks, believe it or not, were not ash. They weren't teak. They were made out of cypress wood. And where does ash come into that? During the Battle of Leyte Gulf, they actually painted the decks with ash from the ship's boilers to help darken her for a night battle that they were expecting. I know next to nothing about cooking. I once got microwave ramen wrong, so I can't really talk about these as kitchen knives, but I am a man who likes my knives. I never go anywhere without a knife. I can definitely rate these knives based on that background. To test the strength of the blade, I have some expired fire hose here. A fire hose is great for shipboard use. If you cut the ends off of it, you can use it as chafing gear so your mooring line won't rub against the concrete of your pier and waste away. Use chafing gear instead. So, just to show how tough this fire hose is, I'm using my regular everyday carrying knife. That's about as far as I can carve into it. Let's try the same thing with one of these kitchen knives. So I'm going to cut just up from that, so I'm not cutting where there's already a hole. Look at that, one knife pass. I already got as far as I was getting with my other blade. Let's see if we can get all the way through. It took 2.5 cuts to get through that fire hose. And look at this, we've got a canvas outer layer, a canvas inner layer, and then a rubber innermost level. So this baby passes the Szymanski sharpness test. If you're ever cooking with fire hose, this will be able to cut through it. Kamikoto has several special offers going on right now and is offering my viewers an extra $50 off any purchase with the discount code Battleship. On top of our special offers, go to kamikoto.com/battleship to get your knives set and help support our channel. Thanks to Kamikoto for sponsoring this video. Get $50 off on any purchase with code Battleship. Go to kamikoto.com/battleship and help support our channel. Their knives work. There's a link in the description below to buy your own set. Remember, discount code Battleship for $50 off. After World War I, armor design became relatively similar between the different nations. The formula used to make armor post-World War I was widely known, and it was pretty much the same wherever you went. Basically, you're taking your high-grade steel and you're adding nickel, chromium, and molybdenum to make an alloy that is particularly resistant to projectiles. And just about everybody's armor did this. So how do you determine, if you've got all of these different sheets of armor, whose is the best and whose is the worst? Well, tests would prove which ones were the best based on how deep the face hardening went. In this race, Japanese World War II armor was notably inferior. We're going to come back to this later on. Even though it's a well-known fact that that is the least effective battleship armor, there's a very good reason for it, and it proved to only be 5% less effective than the most effective battleship armor of World War II. And that 5% margin of error is well within the margin of error for acceptance of the best plates. So even the best armor plates could be on the lower end of the spectrum, the same equivalent as the armor for the worst countries. So there isn't a whole heck of a lot of variance here. And again, we're going to come back to Japanese armor in detail. The next best was German battleship armor, known as Wotan Hart. This battleship armor featured a face-hardened level that was about 41% of the depth of the total armor. The next best armor was US Navy Class A armor plate, which had the deepest face hardening at 55%. Now, interestingly, this deep face hardening made it more brittle, but against smaller caliber hits, it was actually more effective. So against cruiser caliber guns, this deeper face hardening was the very best in the world. Against battleship caliber guns, it was not as good. And then the most effective battleship armor of World War II was British CA, or cemented armor. This featured only a 33% face hardening, which meant that it was the most effective against battleship guns and the least effective against cruiser caliber guns. So you have the British optimized for battleship performance, the Americans, which ended up optimized towards cruiser performance, although I'm not sure that that's what they were shooting for, and the Germans, which was kind of middle of the road, so average against everything. And you had the Japanese, which had the least development over British World War I era armor. And I'm not talking about French or Italian armor designs here, because they basically were using the same depths as other armor manufacturers. So they didn't really have a unique percentage for their armor scheme. So the amount of face hardening is what tests proved to be what was going to be the most effective battleship armor against battleship caliber guns. Japan did a series of tests in the 1920s on the incomplete battleship Tosa. This ship was complete through her hull, but canceled because of the Washington Naval Treaty, so she was state-of-the-art modern. Early Japanese pre-dreadnought and dreadnought-type battleships had been based off of British design practice, and so they used British World War I era armor. The Japanese found from their tests that their armor was pretty effective against everything except shells that fell short of the ship. It's worth noting that the US Navy did similar tests on the nearly complete battleship Washington, BB-47, and found the exact same conclusion and the exact same solution. So, the discovery they made was that a shell that lands short of a ship's armor will hit the water and continue to penetrate and may, if it's got a long enough time delay fuse, punch through the underwater part of the ship beneath the armored belt, where it could punch as deep in the ship as possible and cause significantly more damage. So both the United States and Japan came to this realization, and they figured out how to taper their armored belts so that they could extend their armored belt all the way down to the double or triple bottom. Double bottom for Japanese battleship designs post this, triple bottom for American battleship designs. Now this was good for stopping a plunging shot from an armor-piercing shell, but it was too rigid against aerial drop torpedoes, or submarine drop torpedoes for that matter. Underwater torpedoes would hit this, and because it was so rigid, it would rip the bottom part of the tapered armor away from the upper part of the armored belt, and that seam that it opens up would cause a lot more water intrusion on the ship. And both the United States and Japan knew this, and they accepted that risk. Their battleships are designed to be fighting other battleships and should be screened by smaller ships against aircraft, submarines, destroyers that are firing torpedoes. So, we've looked at the various types of American armor. Let's look at what the Japanese armor was. Japan only completed one class of battleship during World War II. So, all of this relates to the Yamato class. The main armor of the Yamato class battleships was Vickers hardened armor plate. This is a cemented type armor that more or less dates back to World War I without developments. Japan could have kept pace with everybody else's development and modernization. However, they chose not to for cost reasons. They were planning on updating their armor schemes in future classes of battleships, but after going more than 20 years without building a new class of battleships, their armor industry had basically withered away. Other nations had to pour massive amounts of resources into their armored industries to get them ready to go, and Japan decided, we're not going to do that, we're just going to build a bigger battleship with thicker armor than anyone else. Yamato ended up with 22,000 tons of armor plate, the most armor plate on any battleship ever built. The thickest of those plates, the 16-inch armored belt and the 25-inch turret face plates, were made out of this Vickers hardened armor. It's worth noting at this point that the 25-inch face plates of Yamato are the only battleship armor ever put to sea that was completely immune to any other battleship's guns. So, even though Japanese battleship armor is 5% less effective, blah, 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 worst battleship armor during World War II, the Japanese battleships were the only ships that went to sea with an armor plate that was immune to enemy shell fire. Anybody else's armor plate could be penetrated. The next style of armor is New Vickers Non-Cemented. This is the Japanese equivalent of Class B. It's a homogeneous armor that can be used in thick plates. This was used below the waterline, such as the nearly 8-inch thick lower belt that formed part of the torpedo defense. Another type of Japanese armor was Molybdenum Non-Cemented. This was another sort of Class B armor or homogeneous armor that was used extensively, especially for the deck armor on Yamato. The deck armor on Yamato was nearly 8 inches thick, or 25% thicker than on an Iowa-class battleship. The final type of armor is the most inventive of all of them. Japan was the only country that actually prepared for World War II and went into the war knowing that they were going to have shortages. Japan, of course, is an island nation, which means that they do not have all the natural resources of countries like the United States that span an entire continent, or Great Britain, which has a ton of colonial possessions overseas to send them raw materials. So in particular, Japan knew that they had shortages of nickel, molybdenum, and chromium that they needed for making armor steel. So they found out that they could substitute in particularly thinner armor plates, similar to American STS, they could substitute copper for nickel and silicon for molybdenum and still get a similar effectiveness of armor for significantly cheaper. Armor like this was probably used for the 2-inch armored gun houses on Yamato's secondary battery guns and a number of other places like the uptake, the vertical armor around the uptakes and some other areas around the ship. It was also used extensively in other classes of Japanese interwar construction. And I think that that's just brilliant that the Japanese were the one country that actually planned for the war and realized they were going to have shortages. We'd like to thank the sponsor of today's videos, Kamikoto Knives, who makes the finest quality Japanese steel knives in the world. Their knives are every bit as innovative as the armor schemes of Japanese warships like Yamato during World War II. What armor innovation do you think was most important to battleships during World War II? I tend to think that the Japanese experimentation with new materials was the most innovative. Everybody else was using the same stuff. And then when the war started, had trouble getting it in many cases. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think is the most innovative armored innovation of World War II. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses like Kamikoto Knives and individuals like yourselves. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to take advantage of that discount for your own set of Kamikoto knives. Remember to use the Battleship's code Battleship to get that discount. There's also a link for ways you can donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the channel and the museum. Thanks for watching.